We spoke briefly about the situation in Texas and in Mexico. Let's put that within the larger context of what's happening in Central America, Central and South America, and Latin America during this time of church history as well. So there's a tension developing in Latin America during these centuries between the peninsulares and the criollos. What's the difference between the two? The peninsulares are those who come from the peninsula. What are we referring to? The Iberian Peninsula, those who come from Spain. Spain or Portugal, in those places where we have Portuguese settlers. So there's a conflict between those who are from Europe and those now who are from the New World, the criollos, who are sort of over the Native Americans and the slaves. So they are building, as we saw, the same situation that we had in the United States. They're increasing their wealth by organizing people and money, these criollos are, and they're beginning to ask themselves, why do we need the peninsulares, the people from Europe, ruling over us? Good question, right? We asked the same question here in the United States. Why do we need people in Britain ruling over us? And we all heard of Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, a Mexican priest, a criollo, who, what's interesting is in the church then we had this split too, because the leaders of the church were typically peninsulares, the bishops, and the priests in Mexico, typically they were criollos. So what happened was he had a criollo priest, Father Miguel, who made a move because the criollos were planning a conspiracy against Spain. Spain found out about it, the Gachupines, so what Father Miguel did was he planned a conspiracy. Before being arrested, he declared independence from Spain on September the 16th, 1810. Hidalgo, Catholic priest, led an unorganized army of 60,000 Indians and mestizos. Mestizos, the name that we use for those of mixed race, right? Father Miguel was captured and executed. He was succeeded by another priest. Did we know that Morelos was a priest as well? Father Jose Maria Morelos, another Catholic priest. So we see how it is that the church history and the history that kids study in school, I mean, it's often related. There are a lot of elements that intersect. Tensions were felt in the church. The peninsulares enjoyed higher church offices. The criollos and mestizos were the lower clergy. So how interesting that most bishops, being peninsulares, supported the crown in Spain. And they condemned rebellion, whereas most priests were criollos, and they encouraged support for the rebellion. If you want power in this world, one of two sources: organize people, organize money. What were the priests doing on a weekly basis in their church? They were organizing the people. When you get the people together and start talking to them about human rights or how it is that we should rebel against the crown, that can be a dangerous situation. After the rebellion, most bishops, the peninsulares, returned to the peninsula, to Spain, leaving their dioceses vacant. So now we have a question in Mexico, for instance. What do we do with these empty seats? Who should name the bishops to these empty dioceses in Mexico? Spain insisted on its right, the Patronato Real, right? That Spain was saying, we are going to name the bishops. But in Mexico, those members of the new republic were saying, why should the crown of Spain appoint our bishops rather than us appointing our own bishops, the Patronato Nacional, instead? Right? We're our own government. We have the right to choose our own bishops now rather than looking to Spain to appoint bishops for us. In 1827, it's fascinating history because the Pope tended to side with Spain. We remember the geography there, how it was that Spain was always a very Catholic country. So the popes tended to support Spain. Spain did not recognize the independence of a lot of Latin America, a lot of South America. So what happened was when Pope Leo XII in 1827 named bishops in Colombia, what he was doing in effect was he was recognizing the independence of Colombia. That did not sit well with the Spanish crown. So it caused a rift between the Vatican and Spain. King Ferdinand broke off relationships with Rome, and the Pope undid what he had previously done. But there becomes an interesting situation. If there are no bishops in Mexico, then who's going to ordain people? There's no one to ordain. So what happens is Due to the lack of bishops, there are no priests being ordained. And if you have no priests being ordained, who's serving the people? The people are going to have their own version of religion. We often refer to it as the fides populi. The fides populi is the faith of the people. Imagine for a moment if there were no Father Jamie or Deacon Cleophas or Deacon Roy, Deacon Johnny, Deacon Anita. We're taking all of them out of this room, and suddenly the church is up to y'all. Okay? That's essentially what was happening in Mexico. Fides populi, it's the faith of the people now that's going to shape it, which is why Saints' Days are going to be really important, because do you need a priest to celebrate a Saints' Day in a town? We can celebrate a saint with or without a priest. The Rosary, we can pray the Rosary with or without a priest. Right? A lot of our devotions, we can do these things without priests. And so we see a big rise in those sorts of things. Santeria, have we all heard of Santeria? Now that we're bringing slaves over from Africa to the New World, these slaves have their own indigenous religions. When that mixes with the Catholic religion, they look at the Catholic saints and they see their own gods. They're praying to the same image, they're not praying to the same God. Going forward in history, President Benito Juarez was president of Mexico from 1858 to 72, so some 14 years. The church up until that time had many privileges, so that, for instance, well, Benito Juarez was the one who came along and took those privileges away from the church. Benito Juarez, remember, came from the class of people in Mexico. He was not a peninsular. He ordered the church to divest of all property not needed for religious functions. So if you need something for a religious reason, you get to keep it as a church. But all these lands, wait a minute. If it's not serving a function for you, it belongs to the government. All of the records used to be kept by the church. The church was responsible for birth records, marriage records, death records. No. Let's take that away from the church and put that in the hands of the government. Have we heard of the Porfiriato? President Porfirio Diaz had a 34-year rule, which is known for its violent suppression of anyone who opposed him, but he did establish relationships with the church again. How interesting that persons in power, dictators, often tend to align themselves with other power structures. Porfirio Diaz was deposed in 1911, the revolution, and the privileges of the church were cut short with harsher anti-clerical laws. Many of us may have heard of, it was at that time that priests, for instance, could not dress in clerical garb in Mexico, couldn't exercise their ministry as priests. A lot of priests were killed. In 1926, the supporters of the church had enough. They called themselves Cristeros. Their cry was, "Viva Cristo Rey," long live Christ the King. And under that cry, they organized themselves. And in this revolution, 30,000 of them were killed. But in the process, they killed 60,000 troops. Another war about religion. That war ended with a treaty in 1929.
Great book by Graham Greene of The Labyrinthian Way. It also has another title about priests going in Mexico. A lot of them came out of San Antonio. There was a where you train priests seminary set up in San Antonio to sneak priests into Mexico.
And there are all sorts of stories of priests during that time. Santo Toribio Romo, the patron saint of undocumented persons here in the United States, Santo Toribio was one of those Mexican priests who he couldn't exercise his ministry as a priest, so he had to hide his mask in a really creative way. And he would dress up as a mechanic to ride his bike from town to town celebrating Mass, because if he was caught as a priest, he would have been executed.
Wow.